Okay, so let's start a new project, shall we? We are in a fresh project here, and the first thing I want to do is make sure that anything that we don't need is removed from the startup file because I have got the HDRI setup, sun lamp, and I saved them as default startup file. So I want to remove these to remove any confusion. So I'm gonna remove the fake user and delete it. Let's delete the sun as well. Okay, now I would like to import a reference photo. I have already worked on this project before, as I have mentioned, and I think it would be better if I was to import an image of my design and try to follow it during the course to minimize any sort of thinking or unnecessary time spent trying to figure things out. Okay, so to import a reference photo, you will need an add-on. It comes pre-installed with Blender, and to make sure that it is on, press Shift A, and you will see an entry here called Image Reference. If you don't find that, that means it is off, and you need to enable it. So let's go to Preferences, let's go to Add-ons, and let's look for Image. And there you have Import, Export, import images as planes. Make sure that that is on and save your preferences. Okay, so let's press Shift A, image, and reference. I'll be including the reference photo as a downloadable file for you to follow along. Once I have the image imported, actually, I did a mistake. We need to go to the front view by pressing 1 on your numpad. Make sure that the lights of your numpad are turned off so that you don't type numbers. Instead, you type the auxiliary keys of the numpad. So 1, front view. Let's do that again. Shift A, image, reference. And that's really important because it will follow or face whatever direction you're looking at and you want it to face up front. Once I have the reference photo imported, I want to scale it down to match the dimensions of the project I worked on before. As I have said, I want to minimize any sort of figuring out, and the first step of doing that is making sure that the reference photo is, or the bottle in the reference photo is as tall as the bottle in the project I worked on before. So I'm gonna scale it. I'll go to items. I think that's what it's called. I will type 0.565. There we go. If you want to follow along and obtain the exact results that I will be getting, you might want to scale it down as well. I'm also going to create a new window here. So hover over the corner and pull to the right. And I'm going to be adding the render that I achieved working on this project a few months back, just because it's easier to model the bottle if we can see how it looks in the render, and also for me to be able to explain why I'm doing certain things the way I'm doing them. So I'm going to open the render, and it's gonna be all the way over here. I'm not sure why it's all the way here, but yeah. Now let's model the bottle by first creating a cylinder. So Shift A on your keyboard and create a cylinder. Let's scale it down. And I'll make sure that it is as thick as the bottle in the reference photo. I'm going to move it with G on your keyboard, and constraining the movement with the Z axis by pressing Z on your keyboard. Now we can scale with S and press Z to scale it along the Z axis. Let's move it again. I'm bringing this pie menu by pressing Z on my keyboard. If you don't have that enabled, you need to enable it in the add-ons. So look for pie and you can find it there. Enable it. Now if you press Z, you can easily switch between wireframe, rendered, solid, material, whatever. Maybe we can bring the bottom a little bit lower. So go to edit mode with the tab on your keyboard. Make sure you are in the vertex select mode. Let's select these vertices by clicking and dragging G and Z to move them down, like so. We will have to bevel this side here. So let's go to the solid mode and bevel with Control B. That's good enough. Let's shade this smooth. So I'm gonna bring up the search menu. I believe the default shortcut for this is F3. If it doesn't work, then you can try F2. Actually, F2 is for renaming, I believe. I have it bound to spacebar, so I'm going to search for smooth and I'm going to select shade smooth. We can also go to data, normals, and auto smooth, and that will fix the shading issues until we subdivide our model with the subdivision modifier. If you pay attention in the render here, you can see that there is some sort of elevation happening at the bottom of the bottle. So you have the bottom edge, but the inside of the bottom is higher, is lifted from the ground. We can do that by going to edit mode with the tab on your keyboard, and let's switch to face select mode. Let's select the bottom face, and we need to inset this face by pressing I on the keyboard, and we can inset this a few times. Maybe 3 times will be enough. And after we have inserted for the 3rd time, we need to merge these at the center. Make sure that your pivot point is set to median, and let's press S to scale and type 0 on your keyboard. Once you have done this operation, you have multiple vertices stacked up on each other, and you need to fix that. How we fix that is by pressing M on the keyboard to merge, and let's select by distance. We have removed 31 vertices. Now let's switch to vertex select, and let's select the middle one, and on your keyboard press Ctrl plus to increment the selection and move it upwards with G and Z. So maybe we can go to the front view with one on your numpad, except you need to turn off the numpad light. Let's go and enable X-ray and try to get the elevation right there. Perfect. Let's turn off the X-ray, remove the reference photo. That looks good enough now. Now let's subdivide the model. Let's go to the modifier tab and add a subdivision modifier. Let's look for subdivision surface. And I'm going to up the subdivision to 4. Looking good enough for now. But at the top, we have all sorts of shading issues happening. But that will not be forever. We are gonna fix that. Let's go to the front view. Let's go to edit mode with tab on your keyboard. Let's create some edge loops by hovering on the cylinder and pressing Ctrl R. With your mouse scroll wheel, scroll up. I would say this amount is enough. Now with the top face, as you can see in the reference photo, we have this sort of inside effect going on. And we need to recreate that. So with the top face selected, we don't need to delete it. We can simply extrude with E and bring it downward. Let's go to the front view. Let's disable subdivision modifier. Let's enable X-ray and let's enable the reference photo. And let's bring it down to about there and scale it. So if you pay attention here, we have some thickness on the model, and in order for me to know which edge to follow, is it the inside or the outside, I'm going to quickly add a solidify modifier and configuring it to -1. Let's enable the subdivision. So which edge is it creating? It's creating the inside edge. So let's enable the reference photo. Let's disable the subdivision and let's configure it so that it is matching the outer edge of the reference photo, if you know what I mean. I'm following this edge here, not the inside. Now with the face selected, we need to subdivide it to sort of get this nice effect here, this nice curvature. So I'm gonna curve it with Control B. I would say that's good enough. Let's disable the X-ray. And that's the inside of the bottle. And just as we created edge loops on the outside, we will need to create edge loops on the inside as well. So while we are still in the edit mode, Control R while hovering on the inside and scroll up with your mouse a few times. That's enough. Now let's enable the solidify modifier and the subdivision modifier. Now we have some stretching or shading issues happening here, and that's because we did not inset the faces inside the uh, bottle. So let's select the face there and inset with I. Let's inset a few times. Make sure that you are on the median point, and let's scale that. Let's scale that to 0. M to merge by distance, and we remove the duplicates. So let's go to the front view and see where we are heading as far as the reference photo is concerned. Let's enable the X-ray. Let's go to solid mode by pressing tab. Let's enable these modifiers here. I would say we are pretty close to the reference photo. The only thing that we need to work on now is maybe the height or the height of the bottle. As you can see, the solid subdivision modifier is affecting its height, and that's due to multiple factors. The most important one is that when we extruded the top face down to create the inside, we didn't create a sort of like edge there, and we can easily fix that by creating an edge loop in the inside. Move it up with G and constraining the movement to the Z axis, and then scaling a little bit. Now, if we enable both modifiers, go to the front view, enable the reference photo, we can see that we are pretty close to what we are supposed to be getting. I would also like to fix something that I have done that goes contrary to what I have initially done when I first made this render. If you pay attention on the solidify modifier, it is minus 0.01, and initially I had it on 0.01, and I want to fix that. And the mistake was that instead of following the initial thickness of the bottle on the reference photo, I followed the thickness added by the solidify modifier. I was supposed to follow the inner thickness, and that was the mistake. So let's fix it together. Let's scale the bottle by every axis except for the Z axis. So S, Shift, Z, and scale it down. Now let's go to edit mode. Let's go to the vertex select mode. Let's select the bottom vertices and move them up a little. The inner of the bottle is also not matching the reference photo. I can fix that by Control plus and select these vertices, and then Control I and press H. Now we have hidden every vertex that does not belong to the inside of the bottle, and we can easily work on the inside. So let's select these rings here. Press C on your keyboard and select these rings. Let's press delete and dissolve these rings. That doesn't work, so let's go to edge select mode instead. Let's deselect the middle ones because we don't want to mess with those. I'm using the middle mouse button and dissolve these edges. Now let's go to vertex select mode. I thought that this would be good to address since it will benefit you in other projects as well. And now we have the inside matching the reference photo. Now let's press Alt H to unhide. And there we go. Now we need to apply the scaling of the model. If we go to the N panel by pressing N on your keyboard, you will notice that the scale is not 1, and that will cause the solidify modifier to behave strangely. So let's enable X-ray again. Let's disable the reference photo. If you pay attention to this thickness here, it's not the same as this thickness. That's because we have not applied the scale. You can do that by pressing Ctrl A, and the thickness is even all over the model. Let's disable the X-ray modifier. Let's go to edit mode. We have an issue here. I'm not sure what happened for this edge to disappear. So let's press K for the knife tool. Let's select that vertex, and then let's select the middle vertex at the bottom. Click, and then press enter. And now we can fix these. If you want to slide a vertex along the edge, just press G twice. There we go. We have an issue here happening after we applied the scale. And if we go to edit mode, if you remember we deleted edge loops here, we need to recreate them with Ctrl R and scroll up. Let's enable the subdivision modifier. The subdivision modifier needs to be at the bottom of the solidify modifier. And now we can create a lip here. Let's select actually, let's hover on the inside and create an edge loop. Let's bring it up and then scale it to the inside, like so. Let's do the same for the outside. Actually, we don't need that. Let's dissolve that edge. Let's enable subdivision modifier again. Let's select the middle vertex here and Control Alt. Select this ring, G, and press Z and move it up a little bit. We need an edge loop here to tighten the lip. I would say that looks good. Maybe I brought this a little bit too much to the top. So G and Z and move it down. Perfect. Something else I would like to address is this kind of little curvature. If you may see it here, it might be better to show you on the reference photo. So we have a sort of curvature here, and I want to recreate that. Also, my bottle is a lot smaller than the reference photo after we apply the scale. Let's apply the scale again. Um, let's bring this a bit higher. Actually, I'm gonna bring this, all of this higher. Actually, we don't need that edge loop there. And then let's work on the top. Let's scale it a little bit down. Let's also scale the inside. And we have the bottle having that nice curvature. Once we enable the subdivision modifier, let's tone it a little bit down. 4 is a little bit too much. Let's disable auto smoothing. We don't need that anymore. And the bottle is looking quite nice. Perhaps just a little bit thicker at the lip. So Shift Alt and click an edge or a vertex, scale down, and maybe a little bit higher. These little details have a great impact on how the bottle looks in the render. Good enough. Now let's work on the content of the bottle, and that will be quite straightforward. So let's disable the modifiers, and let's go to the front view, edit mode with tab. Let's go to wireframe, enable X-ray, and let's select the bottom vertices like so. And with Control plus, let's select all of these vertices and press Shift D to duplicate. Press Enter and then P and select separate by selection. Now we have the bottle and the content. So let's rename these bottle content reference photo. Now let's go to solid mode. Let's hide the bottle for a little while, and we need to select the top vertices with Shift Alt and click, and then press F to fill that. And then we need to inset this face a few times. Let's scale the last one by 0. Press M, merge by distance. Now this one will not have a solidify modifier, so we are turning it completely off. one thing we need to do is go to the front view, enable X-ray, and let's turn on the modifiers for the bottle. And for the content, we need to scale it ever so slightly so that it does not touch the bottle itself. We might have to tweak it up a little bit while rendering, but I believe that I scaled it down just enough. Now let's make the cup or the cover. We only need one edge for this. So edge select mode, let's select the outer edge by pressing Shift and Alt and clicking an edge, and you will have an edge loop here. So now Shift D to duplicate it, P to separate it, and let's go to the edge that we just created and extrude it upwards. Let's go to the front view, enable the reference photo, G, and move it higher. Just like so. We will fill that face with F. Let's inset it using the key I. Let's disable the subdivision modifier and solidify. Let's see what we are doing. Scale by 0, M, and merge by distance. Let's create some edge loops here. Let's go to isolated mode by pressing / on your keyboard. Let's search for shade smooth, probably F3 on your keyboard, and we have the cup shaded smooth. Let's exit the isolated mode by pressing / again. We might have to bevel this edge here. Let's hide the reference photo. Maybe not bevel, maybe a normal edge. Yeah. I see some pinching here. Let's select all of these edges. And let's select that vertex there. S, Z, press 0. We had some discrepancies happening as far as the positioning on the Z-axis, and scaling by 0 fix that for us. We can make sure that these are also yeah, that worked. You can see that a change happened there. So that's how we make the cup or the cover, if you might. Let's enable the solidify modifier. Let's go to the front view. Let's enable the reference photo. Let's enable X-ray. I would say we nailed it. Now let's work on the array that we can observe in the render image. Uh, in order to do that, let's create a plane and go to the top view. Um, as you remember, I'm trying to recreate this render exactly as it is. So I'm going to scale the plane the way I had it a few months ago when I worked on this project. So let's bring up the N panel with N on your keyboard, and I'm going to scale this to 30.118, and that will make it exactly the same size as in the render image. We don't need the reference photo, so let's hide it. We might as well move it to its own collection. While hovering on your outliner, press M and select new collection. I'm gonna type reference, and I'm going to toggle this off. The bottle as well, I'm gonna rename the cup or the cover to cover, and I'm going to move the bottle to its own collection. Let's hide that as well. And the plane, let's move it to a collection called setup. Okay. If you have a window open here, you can change to geometry nodes. And with the plane selected, let's create a new geometry node setup. Let's rename that to array. Perhaps let's go to the top view and expand this a little bit so that you can see. The first node I'm gonna create is instance on point. So Shift A, and I will search for instance on points. Then I'm going to create a join geometry node. Shift A, join geometry. And this node, if you recall, is created by default. And it's actually what's displaying the plane right now. If I disconnect it from the output, the plane disappears. And if you pay attention on the render image, we have the array of the product, but also the plane. And we need this node here to output the plane as well. So we need the node join geometry to combine our arrays with the plane. And I'm going to connect these just like so. Now let's watch the render image and make a point here. If you look closely, we have one row that is parallel to the second row. Not this one, but the second one. If you pay attention to this product here, it's parallel to the other. And that's because we have two arrays or grids, if you might call them, because in the geometry nodes, we are going to create a grid node to achieve this array. So there are two grids here. So I'm going to be clicking Shift A and looking for grid. And I'm going to be needing two of these. So with one created, let's Shift D and duplicate it. But with two grids created, we need a way to join them. So we are going to need another join geometry node, and we are going to duplicate that as well. And let's connect this just like so. And the geometry to points. The geometry node setup is almost there. However, we have to add a couple of things. Now that we have two grids, we need to tell the software what we want to make grids of. And that will bring us to the next node, which is collection info. And we can select the product from here and connect the instances to instance. And as you can see, the product is starting to appear in the viewport. Now, we don't want the product appearing as big as it does. And to fix that, we can go to the collection info node and changing the setting from original to relative. And that will allow us to display the product in its original size. We also don't want the product to appear vertical. We want it to appear horizontal and align with the plane. To achieve that, we can enable the product collection again and rotate the product by the x-axis. And to do that, let's press R. Let's press X to constrain the rotation to the x-axis and typing 90. Now the product is appearing below the plane. Let's move it above it by pressing G and using the Z button to constrain the movement to the Z-axis. Let's disable show overlays. I'm pressing Shift now to make fine adjustments. Now we can disable the product collection again. The grid node is quite simple, and to demonstrate what it does, I'm going to disable one of them by pressing on it and pressing M on my keyboard to mute it. Now that it is muted, I will manipulate the first one. And as you can see, I can change the size of the grid, the number of the vertices, and that will allow me to create a grid. And if I combine it with the second one, I can create interesting grids. However, these two grids are missing something, and that is the node which allows us to manipulate their position on the plane. So I'm going to press Shift A and search for transform geometry. And let's give each grid a transform geometry node, just like so, and I can further customize my grid with this node. Now, achieving the grid that I have achieved in the render was quite tricky because manipulating two grids and their corresponding transform geometry nodes is quite a nightmare to get it right. So what I'm going to do is basically copy the settings, which took me about an hour or so of tinkering to achieve this grid here. So to save time, I'm just going to input the settings, and you can copy them as well, or you can also come up with your own grid if you wanna. So I'm going to start with the grid node. So 1.1 and then 1.1 and then 16 and then 13 here. And here I'm gonna have 1.1, 1.2, 16, and 14. You might start noticing that your viewport is starting to lag, but that will not be for long. Once we set up the camera and zoom in, it will be snappy again. Or you can temporarily disable the subdivision modifier on the product to speed things up. Then I'm going to change this to 0.45, 0.022, and the other one will have, I believe, 122 or 122, if you might. Actually, sorry. Here we are going to put 0.122 and 0.122, and that will give us the grid, and you can already see that it looks exactly as in the render image. Let's inspect it from the top view. Quite neat, don't you think? Here is the node setup in case you wanna